My father laughed in my face at dinner and told me I wasn't invited to the family vacation in Italy. He said I was dead weight and didn't fit the luxury aesthetic of the $20,000 villa they rented. He wanted a classy trip without his failure daughter. He had no idea that the villa he booked belonged to me. I secretly bought it 3 years ago with my own fortune. I flew there early, let them check in, and waited for the perfect moment. When he insulted me again at breakfast, I introduced myself not as his daughter, but as his landlord. And then I kicked them out. The silence at the dinner table was heavy, the kind that usually precedes a storm. I sat between my mother and my younger sister Emily, trying to slice through a piece of roast beef that was as tough as shoe leather. My father sat at the head of the table, scrolling through his iPad, a glass of red wine in his hand. We were at my parents' house for the mandatory Sunday dinner. I hated these dinners. I was the black sheep, the daughter who chose to become a travel photographer instead of a lawyer like my dad or a doctor like Emily. To them, my life was a series of vacations, not a career. They didn't know that my vacations had landed me contracts with National Geographic and luxury hotel chains, or that I had quietly amassed a net worth that rivaled my father's. I cleared my throat, deciding to break the ice. So, I said, trying to sound casual, I was looking at flights for the family trip to Italy next month. I found a great deal on a direct flight from JFK to Rome. I figured if we book now, we can all sit together. The fork stopped halfway to my father's mouth. He didn't look up from his iPad. Italy? He repeated, his tone flat. Yeah, for the annual vacation, I said, smiling nervously. You guys have been talking about the Amalfi Coast for months. I cleared my schedule for the second week of July. My sister Emily let out a short, sharp giggle. She covered her mouth with her napkin, looking at my mother. My mother looked down at her plate, suddenly very interested in her green beans. Dad finally looked up. He put his iPad down and took a sip of wine. Then he started to laugh. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was a dry, dismissive chuckle that made my skin crawl. Oh, Sarah, he said, shaking his head. You really don't pay attention, do you? What do you mean? I asked, my stomach tightening. We booked the flights 2 weeks ago, Dad said. First class. Emirates. Oh, I said, feeling a flush of embarrassment. Well, that's fine. I can book my own ticket. I just need the flight number so I can meet you guys at the airport or the villa. Dad laughed again, louder this time. He looked at Emily, sharing a private joke. Sarah, he said, leaning forward, a cruel smile playing on his lips. You aren't booking a ticket. You aren't meeting us at the villa. I froze. What? You weren't invited, he said simply. The words hung in the air like smoke. I looked at my mother. She refused to meet my eyes. I looked at Emily, who was smirking. But it's the family vacation, I stammered. We go every year. Why wouldn't I be invited? Because this year we want to actually enjoy ourselves, Dad said, cutting another piece of beef. We're renting a very high-end villa in Positano. It's elegant, sophisticated, and frankly, Sarah, you don't fit the aesthetic. You'd probably show up in those cargo pants with your cameras, dragging down the vibe. We want a luxury experience, not a backpacking tour. I can dress up, I whispered, feeling tears prick my eyes. I know how to behave. It's also a matter of cost, my mother finally spoke up, her voice thin. The villa was very expensive, Sarah. $20,000 for the week. We're splitting it between us and Emily's fiancé. We know you can't afford to contribute, and we're tired of subsidizing you. Subsidizing me? I asked, my voice trembling. I haven't asked you for money in 5 years. But you would have, Dad interrupted. You always do. You'd eat the food, drink the wine, and offer to pay us back later. We're done carrying dead weight. This trip is for the successful members of the family. Successful, I repeated. Yes, Emily just made chief resident. I closed a big case. We deserve this. You take pictures. Dad waved his hand dismissively. Stay home, Sarah. Edit your photos. Maybe next year, if you get a real job, we'll consider a camping trip. Emily laughed. Yes, Sarah. Enjoy the staycation. I sat there for a moment, absorbing the humiliation. They thought I was broke. They thought I was uncultured. They thought I was a burden. Okay, I said quietly. I stood up. I didn't finish my dinner. I grabbed my purse. Leaving so soon? Dad mocked. Don't go crying about it. It's just a vacation. I'm not crying, I said, my voice steady now. I just realized I have some work to do. Have a great trip. Really. I hope the villa is everything you dreamed of. I walked out of the house, my heart pounding with rage. I got into my car, my brand new Audi RS7, that I parked down the street, so they would unask questions, and drove away. My father thought he had struck a blow. He thought he had put me in my place. But he had made one critical error. He didn't know who owned the villa. I pulled over into a parking lot and pulled out my phone. I opened my email. I searched for Villa Serenity Positano. There it was. The booking confirmation from the rental management company I used to handle my properties abroad. Guest name, Robert Miller. Dates, July 10th, July 17th. Status, confirmed. Owner payout, $20,000. I stared at the screen. My parents had rented my house. I had bought the villa 3 years ago after a particularly lucrative shoot for a luxury travel magazine. I kept it under an LLC called Horizon Stays because I valued my privacy. My parents had no idea. They just saw a pretty house online and booked it, thinking they were rubbing elbows with the elite. They wanted a luxury experience. They wanted to exclude the dead weight. I tapped the screen and dialed my property manager in Italy, Marco. Buongiorno, Sarah. Marco answered cheerfully. Everything is ready for your family's arrival next week. I'd prepared the welcome basket just like you asked. Hi, Marco, I said, a cold smile spreading across my face. Change of plans. Do not give them the welcome basket. Oh? Is there a problem? No problem, I said. But I've decided to visit the property myself during their stay. I'm flying out tomorrow. But the guests? Marco asked, confused. Your family? Don't tell them I'm the owner, I said. Let them check in. Let them get comfortable. Let them unpack their expensive suits and open the champagne. I want to surprise them. Understood, Marco said, though he sounded nervous. I hung up. My dad said I wasn't invited. He said I didn't fit the aesthetic. Well, he was about to find out that the aesthetic he paid $20,000 for belonged entirely to me. And the landlord was coming to collect something much more valuable than rent. I flew to Italy 3 days before my family was scheduled to arrive. I didn't fly first class like my father bragged about. I flew private. One of the perks of being a photographer for billionaires was knowing which jets had empty seats. But this time, I chartered my own. It was an indulgence, sure, but I needed to be in the right headspace. I needed to feel like the owner, not the daughter. I arrived at Villa Serenity in the late afternoon. It was breathtaking. Perched on the cliffs of Positano, overlooking the Tyrrhenian Sea, it was a masterpiece of Italian architecture. I walked through the rooms, running my hands over the marble countertops and silk drapes. Everything is perfect, Signorina Sarah, Marco said, following me with a clipboard. The pool is heated. The chef is prepped. Excellent, I said. Now, Marco, remember the plan. When they arrive, you treat them like royalty. Give them the best wine. Let them think they own the place. And when you appear? Just step back, I smiled. I'll handle the introductions. My family arrived on a Tuesday. I watched from the security monitors in the master suite, which I had locked and marked as private owners' quarters. They pulled up in a rented Mercedes van. Dad stepped out first, wearing a linen suit and a Panama hat, looking every inch the wealthy tourist. Mom followed, fanning herself. Emily and her fiancé, Greg, were already taking selfies by the infinity pool before their bags were even inside. This is incredible, I heard Dad shout through the open window. Now this is how the Millers vacation. No backpacks, no cheap cameras, just class. It's perfect, Daddy, Emily squealed. Sarah would have hated this. Too much soap. They all laughed. I sat in my room, sipping espresso, and waited. I let them have their first night. I let them drink the complimentary limoncello. I let them sleep in the 800 thread count sheets. The next morning, I woke up early. I dressed in a stunning white sundress designer, of course, and put on my oversized sunglasses. I walked down the grand staircase to the terrace where they were having breakfast. They were all there. Dad was reading a newspaper. Mom was pouring coffee. Emily was complaining about the Wi-Fi speed. Good morning, I said cheerfully. The silence that followed was instant and absolute. Dad dropped his newspaper. Mom spilled coffee on the tablecloth. Emily's jaw hit the floor. Sarah? Dad choked out. What? How did you get here? I flew, I said, walking over to the buffet table and picking up a croissant. Direct flight. Very comfortable. But you weren't invited, Mom shrieked. Robert, tell her. She can't be here. You followed us? Emily accused, standing up. That is so creepy, Sarah. You stalked us to Italy because you're jealous. I didn't stalk you, I said, taking a bite of the pastry. I'm staying here. No, you are not, Dad yelled, his face turning red. I paid $20,000 for this villa. It is private property. You are trespassing. Get out before I call the police. You paid $20,000 to rent the guest wings, I corrected him calmly. The master suite is reserved. Reserved for who? Dad demanded. The owner. Exactly, I said. Well, the owner isn't here, Dad shouted. So get out. Actually, I said, lifting my sunglasses and looking him dead in the eye. She is. They stared at me. Confusion rippled through the group. What are you talking about? Mom asked, her voice trembling. I own the villa, I said. You're lying, Emily scoffed. You take pictures of birds for a living. This place costs millions. 4.5 million to be exact, I said. And I bought it cash 3 years ago. You can check the deed if you want. It's under Horizon Stays, LLC, my company. Dad looked at me, then looked around the opulent terrace. He looked at the view he had been bragging about. He looked at the staff, who were standing quietly in the corner, watching me with respect. Marco, I called out. Marco stepped forward immediately. Yes, Signorina Sarah. Please confirm for my guests who signs your paycheck. You do, Signorina, Marco said, bowing slightly. Miss Sarah is the sole owner of Villa Serenity. Dad collapsed into his chair. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. You double quote, he wheezed. You own this? I do, I said. And I have to say, Dad, I was really hurt when you said I didn't fit the aesthetic. I designed the aesthetic. Every pillow, every painting, every tile. It's all me. But you're broke. Mum cried, tears of confusion streaming down her face. We send you birthday checks. I never cashed them, I said. I donated them to charity. I didn't need your $50, Mom. I make more than that in the time it takes to click the shutter on my camera. Emily sat down slowly. So ... You're rich. I'm successful, I corrected. There's a difference. You have a high income, Emily. I have wealth. And unlike you, I don't need to post about it to feel validated. I looked at Dad. He was pale, sweating. He realized the power dynamic had just shifted violently. He wasn't the king anymore. He was a tenant. So, I said, brushing crumbs off my hands, since I wasn't invited to the family vacation, I assume you'll be leaving. Leaving? Dad stammered. But ... we paid. We have a contract. The contract has a clause, I said. Clause 14B. The owner reserves the right to terminate the rental agreement immediately if guests display disrespectful or abusive behavior toward the owner or staff. I leaned in closer. You called me dead weight, Dad. You said I was a waste of space. You laughed at me. I'd say that counts as disrespectful. Sarah, please, Mom begged. We didn't know. We're your parents. You didn't know I had money, so you treated me like trash, I said coldly. That's the problem. You only respect people you think are better than you. Well, congratulations. I'm better than you. I turned to Marco. Marco, please assist my family with their luggage. They have 1 hour to vacate the premises. Sarah, no. Emily wailed. We have nowhere to go, it's peak season. Every hotel is booked. I hear there's a nice campsite down the coast, I said, echoing Dad's words from dinner. Maybe you can get a camping experience. It builds character, right, Dad? Dad didn't speak. He just stared at me, seeing me for the first time in his life. Not as his daughter, but as his superior. I turned and walked back toward the house. Enjoy the packing, I called over my shoulder. I thought that was the end. I thought they would leave in shame. But I underestimated my father's ego. He wasn't just going to leave. He was going to try to burn it down. An hour later, I was in the library, reviewing some proofs for my next book, when I smelled smoke. I ran out to the terrace. My father was standing by the infinity pool, holding a lit cigar. He wasn't packing. He was relaxing. And next to him, on the pristine white stone, was a small pile of my custom-designed patio cushions, smouldering. What are you doing? I screamed, running toward him. Just enjoying my vacation. Dad sneered, blowing smoke in my face. I paid 20 grand, Sarah. I'm going to get my money's worth. If I can't stay, I'm going to leave a mark. He flicked the cigar ash onto the burning cushions. You're destroying my property. Sue me, he laughed. I'm your father. No court will side with a daughter who evicts her own parents. He picked up a bottle of expensive red wine from the table and poured it deliberately onto the white limestone deck. The dark liquid spread like a bloodstain. Oops, he said. Clumsy me. Mom and Emily stood by the van watching. They looked horrified, but they didn't stop him. They never stopped him. That's it, I said, my voice shaking with rage. Marco, call the carabinieri. You wouldn't, Dad challenged. You wouldn't call the Italian police on your own father. Watch me. 10 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. They didn't care who Dad was. They didn't care about his status in America. They saw a man damaging private property and refusing to leave. Signore, the officer said sternly. You come with us. This is ridiculous. Dad shouted as they grabbed his arms. I am an American citizen. I demand to speak to the embassy. My daughter is crazy. Your daughter is the owner, the officer said, handcuffing him. And you are under arrest for vandalism and trespassing. Mum screamed. Emily cried. I just stood there, watching them drag my father away. You happy now? Mum spat at me as she climbed into the van to follow the police car. You destroyed this family. No, Mom, I said softly. You destroyed it when you decided I wasn't worth inviting. They left. I stayed at the villa for another week. I had the cushions replaced. I had the stone cleaned. I swam in the pool alone, drank the wine and watched the sunset. It was lonely, but it was peaceful. My father spent 2 nights in an Italian jail before Mom bailed him out. They flew home immediately, economy class, because they had to use the vacation fund for legal fees. 6 months later, I was back in the States for a gallery opening. My work was being featured in a major exhibit. I saw them there. Mom and Emily. They were standing outside the gallery, looking at the poster with my face on it. They saw me walk up. I was wearing a dress that cost more than their car. I looked happy. Mum took a step toward me. Sarah ... I stopped. I looked at her. We miss you, she said. Dad is ... He's sorry. He's embarrassed. He should be, I said. Can we start over? She asked. We can have a family dinner. I'll make roast beef. I laughed. The shoe leather? Please, she whispered. We're family. I looked at them. I realized I didn't hate them anymore. I just didn't need them. I had built a life, a career, and a home without their help. In fact, I had done it despite them. I'm sorry, Mom, I said. I'm busy. I have a flight to catch tomorrow. Where are you going? Emily asked, her eyes wide. Bali, I said. I just bought a resort there. It needs some work. I walked past them and into the gallery, where people were waiting to celebrate me. People who respected me. People who knew my worth. And as I sipped champagne and listened to the applause, I realized something. My father was right. I didn't fit their aesthetic. I was in a league of my own. If you loved watching Sarah serve justice Italian style, smash that like button. And here is a question for you. If your parents rented your house without knowing it was yours, and then insulted you, would you kick them out like Sarah did, or let them stay? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of karma served cold.